Hey there. Welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide Podcast. I'm Stacy.
And I'm Brooke.
From Justice IT Consulting, where we help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're at hired guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance, but today we're here to give you all the secrets for free, so if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Today's episode is going to be a little different because not too long ago, Brooke just got back from CS5 West, which is one of the biggest events in the CMMC ecosystem. So today we're going to break down the biggest takeaways from the conference and what defense contractors should actually be paying attention to right now. All right, Brooke, so after sitting through all of those wonderful CS5 sessions, what would you say was the biggest overall theme at CS5 West this year?
Really, the biggest theme was that, it's not theoretical. It's not something that may happen in the future or anything like that. It's here. It's happening at a fast pace. It's actually happening at a faster pace than they set out for it to happen. They're gonna. I think the first phase one, they wanted to have 500 or so certifications done, and through before May. I don't remember when exactly, but they already had over 1,000 certifications complete. So, there's going to be a few more than 500 for the first phase one, and it's coming. It's here. We're seeing how assessors are actually assessing things. We're seeing. We're just seeing a lot of information about how things are being done now, right? And how, documentation and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's not theoretical. It's here. One of the things that came up that was a constant theme throughout is that the small dib contractors or subcontractors are, they're having a hard time. It's hard for them to afford and or take the time to become compliant and become certified. And everybody knew this. Everybody, and we can go through everything we've already talked about, that they've known this since 2017. This is not a surprise. The only surprise in the last couple of years should be how much the assessments cost, right? And that's, you can thank the DOW for that by laying out exactly how many assessors have to take part, and laying out you can thank the cap, and all that kind of fun stuff for the amount of labor that goes into the assessments. But in any case, they're not just real apologetic about the cost of implementation, because that's been on the books for quite a while. People were supposed to have taken care of this, although there are some things that we've realized in the past couple of years that, this documentation we've had, that we've had policies and we've had this and we do logging and all this kind of fun stuff. It's not quite up to snuff, and we've got to bone up our documentation. So that, there's some things like that, and it's understandable, but the basics of it have been around, how to implement it and everything for quite a long time. But small contractors certainly are struggling with the cost and the complexity of it.
Something that we've been hearing buzzing around in terms of what was spoken about at the conference is that people that attended notice that companies are running out of time. So what was all that about?
So there is, phase one ends in November 9th, right? Phase two begins on November 10th. That's when certifications will start coming out on contracts. The primes are already wanting and requiring their subs to get them. And I know of one prime that's shouting it from the mountaintops, and that you've got to be, we want to firm up our base, our subcontractor base, and get them taken care of now and early. And if you're late to the party, you're going to get crumbs, it's, if you're just starting your compliance journey, it takes 12 to 18 months on a good track, just getting it all done. It takes 12 to 18 months to put everything in place, right? If you're in some other phase of it, it may take may not take quite as long, but starting from scratch, I darn well bet on 12 to 18 months. So, and going through a lot of pain of figuring out how to get it implemented and upending of your work processes right now, right? Another thing they talked about was PALT, which is Procurement Administrative Lead Time. So it's basically the amount of time between a solicitation being finalized and the contract award happening. So basically that's shrinking. Okay. I don't think I have the numbers here on my little cheat sheet. So some mean timelines discussed for around 32 days, but they had all sorts of charts and graphs on, on the amount of time, lead time for those, for the procurement administrative lead time. So the amount of time you have to show that you're, get your certification, and win that award, right? So, that's shrinking. You certainly don't have time to go, hey, I'm going to go ahead and try to get this, contract here, and I want to be awarded this contract. I'm going to get certified before it's done. So, if you're, a lot of companies have been putting this off, we don't have to be certified yet. We're just going to put it off. And, we think we're about ready. And I can tell you, everybody that thinks they're about ready or at some point in the process, when we bring them on and do a gaps analysis, they are a lot further behind than they realized. And a lot of it is documentation and coming up with that documentation, right? Some of it is implementation and a lot of it is not scoping properly. We always talk about scope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to scope properly. You've got to understand where CUI is, all that kind of fun stuff. So you can't wait to get ready and go through your certification process. You need to spool that up now, get it done. Are there going to be opportunities for contracts? If you get certified in 2027, I'm sure there probably will be, but like I said, I know somebody well that works at I'm not going to name them really. If you're at CS5, you probably, or in the channel very much, you probably know who I'm talking about. But one of them said, like I said a minute ago, if we are firming up our base right now, and if you don't get certified and show us that you're on a path to get certified very soon, then, you get certified at the end of the year or next year, great, wonderful, but you're going to get crumbs. Everybody else is going to get the preference, right? And so, how true that is, how much that happens, I really don't know, but that's what they're saying. Other primes are really pushing their subcontractors to get certified. So don't wait. It's a long process. It's a long, arduous process. So get started on it.
So kind of elaborating more on what you mentioned previously about scope, and as Austin would say, all roads lead back to scope.
They do, absolutely.
It seems like that was something that kept coming up over and over again at CS5. Could you elaborate a little bit more about what they were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of discussion around scope because, what we find too, but what assessors are finding is that, some of these companies haven't scoped properly. Maybe they have an enclave, quote enclave. There's that wonderful word again. Maybe they have an enclave and they say all their CUI is in there, but really it's not. They said, here's my enclave right here. Everything's in this box. And then you find out, there's some computers out here that connect to it that download CUI. And so now your enclave has just been pierced. And so or it just expanded, however you want to look at it. And that's another thing that has come up is the word enclave. Enclaves don't necessarily fit for everybody. And it depends on how you really look at an enclave. If you're looking at truly what we think is enclave, draw a little box around it and no information goes out of that, right? Then you're going to have a there are very few people, very few companies that can deal with that. Manufacturers, hard time dealing with it. Or construction companies, hard time dealing with it. Services companies, maybe. If you develop applications or you develop AI or whatever for the government, maybe those will be covered. But manufacturers and construction companies, they're going to have a really hard time using a exclusive enclave option, right? And so that really goes back to scope. You've got to know what kind of CUI you have and figure out why you think that, right? And so you got to know what CUI you have, and you got to know where it resides. You got to know where it flows. So where any of your systems that process, transmit, or store CUI, you've got to draw that out in a data flow diagram and figure out where everything is, and then figure out if you want to how you can tighten that up and make that scope smaller, right? So, but you do have to take everything a holistic approach in mind to try to figure that out, because a lot of companies underscope. Overscoping is a problem too, but underscoping is definitely a problem and will lead to a failed assessment. Overscoping, it'll just lead to maybe more expense, a little bit of overkill, right? Or maybe a lot of overkill. I don't really know, but it won't necessarily fail your assessment, whereas underscoping will.
At CS5 West, did they talk about operational workload and maybe some business processes?
Yeah, absolutely. We've said this. A lot of people have said this. It's CMMC is not an IT project. IT certainly has a big seat at the table, but not the only seat. Not IT doesn't run the business. Except maybe in our case, we're an IT company, so
Right.
that's a little different. But IT doesn't run the business, so you need to have your business leaders. You need to have anybody, the people that do the work, involved. You've got to know how those processes really work. Me as an IT person, I might think this is the way it works. ABC 1, 2, 3, and then somebody in production may come and say, no, we also do these things. And I just found out from a longtime client that they did something a little differently than I could swear that we've talked about in the past, but maybe not. But they do some things differently because we sat down and specifically talked about a couple of these controls, but you got to have the right people in the room and of course ask the right questions. This is by and large a documentation and process change or compliance, right? So yes, there are some cybersecurity controls you have to implement, but you've got to identify them, you've got to define them, you've got to authorize them. None of that is IT. So some of that may be. There may be drawn a network diagram, for instance, but that is not specifically an IT problem. It's a company problem.
It looks like there's a lot of chatter about continuous compliance. Can you elaborate on what was being talked about?
Sure. They really, the whole NIST 800-171 and CMMC are not written to be a one and done kind of thing, or even once every 3 years and done kind of thing. It is is meant for ongoing management and compliance, right? So you got to have things to monitor your controls. You got to have meetings to review things. You got to, review those logs. You got to make sure you sign off on the visitor check-in log, all that kind of fun stuff. And this is meant for ongoing management, ongoing monitoring and review. There are all sorts of companies popping up. AI companies, for instance, that'll help you gather your documentation or your artifacts, and do that on an automated basis. I don't really know about giving any of those access to my environment, but there are those platforms that will do that kind of stuff for you. So, but it's all about ongoing monitoring and maintenance and management.
So, Brooke, was there anything interesting around assessments themselves and what that entails?
Sure. Everybody, there's a couple things really, but lowdown, the basics, the takeaway is that you really, really should do a mock assessment with the see-through PAO that is going to do your certification assessment. Because from experience, I can tell you that different assessors will absolutely assess differently. As structured and everything as they make all this, different assessors will assess differently. Right, wrong, or indifferent, however you want to look at it, they will do it differently. So, and wildly differently. So those mock assessments are critical, right? Because you want to you get all ready, maybe even do a readiness assessment with you could do it with a see-through PAO, an RPO. You could do it with, if it's an RPO, do it with one that's has some CCPs and, maybe even a CCA on staff. But, some people who know that what they're talking about, that, they've been in this and they've been through some of it. So, but, an RPO, a see-through PO to help you get ready. Or maybe you have internal people that have gone through all this, right? And really know what they're talking about and really understand all of it and understand the assessment part, not just the controls and how to implement them, but the assessment part, right? So you have that, but then you have your mock assessment with the actual see-through PAO that will do your certification assessment. And they perform the mock assessment exactly like they will do the certification assessment. The only thing is they don't validate and upload everything to EMAS. So none of it's reported. It's here's how you did. Here's the controls that were met and not met. Now, when I say exactly like the certification assessment, that means they can't do any kind of thing that they could even misconstrue as consulting, because that is a line they do not cross. They don't want to cross. That Code of Professional Conduct is they hammer that into everybody that's certified in the ecosystem. They hammer that into you. Nothing that they could even be misconstrued as consulting, right? They can tell you what you missed and maybe the basics of why you missed it, but they can't get into details and that give you ideas of how to fix that, right? This is what you need to do to go to fix that, right? But those mock assessments, everybody agrees they're pretty critical to having a successful certification assessment. And you don't want to go through a certification assessment and fail it. And what I can tell you is, you can have some POAM items that you can close out in 180 days, or you have 180 days to close them out. That's great and wonderful, except the 5-pointers and 3-pointers, those can't be POAM'd. Some of the 1-pointers can't be POAM'd. You know what can be POAM'd? All the easy stuff. So, that kind of defeats the purpose. It's all the hard stuff that can't be POAM'd, and so you're probably not going to miss one of the easy things. It's probably going to be one of the hard things you miss. And if you miss one assessment objective on one of those 5-pointers or 3-pointers, then you're out of luck. So that's why those mock assessments are critical, super critical. The other thing they talked about was that what they're finding from a C3 PAO's perspective, there's a lot of companies that are not ready. Now, when you back up a little bit and really think about what not ready means, yes, technically these companies are just not ready. But what they're finding is that the documentation doesn't hold up to where they want it to hold up to, right? One assessor may think some things are okay and another assessor won't, and they may be mixed on some other things. But you really need to have your documentation buttoned up. And that is the biggest problem that is slowing down assessments right now, is that documentation piece. That's a huge piece of it. But anyway, the documentation, not that documentation is in bad shape, not that, not that you don't have it or anything like that, but maybe it's not how the assessor wants to see it, or it's not clear enough, right? So the documentation is a big thing of why people are not moving through those mock assessments and certification assessments.
It looks like some hot topics around CMMC, like G code and CUI were discussed.
Of course. Oh, yeah.
There's not a CMMC conference if that's not brought up. So
Right.
if you could elaborate on what was being said about those topics, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, really. There's, there's a raging debate over whether G code and those kinds of derived information. I'll refrain from calling it CUI because that's the debate, right? But that derived information that comes from the specs and documents that you may get that are definitely CUI, right? There are those that say absolutely, definitely, if it's created in the performance of that contract from CUI, right? Then yes, that's going to be CUI. So G code, unless you can definitely unless you can definitely say that this G code is just a small piece that is going to be a regular off-the-shelf product that I sell to anybody, unless you can say that, and unless you can document that and document why you're saying that, then I'd consider G code and the other types of code like that. I'd consider G code CUI. That is the safest thing to do. You may be able to argue your way out of it, but there may be an assessor that says, nope, that's G code is CUI. Of course, that could be one of the questions that you ask when you're interviewing C3PAOs. That could be one of the questions you ask. I can almost guarantee that they will not have a very good detailed explanation of whether it is or not. The short answer is going to be, well, it depends. So, but if you're going to say that your G code is not CUI, then you need to document it very well and be able to argue it articulately. If that's where articulately, anyway, to the assessor, right? And in CMMC speak, not in manufacturing. Well, maybe in manufacturing speak too, but they've got to understand why it's not CUI. So, barring that really good documented, really detailed explanation, be safe and call it CUI.
So with CMMC compliance, there's always enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Can you delve into what they talked about in terms of enforcing CMMC?
Yeah, there's a few things there, but really, I think what we're talking about is, annual affirmations. You get certified, and then some lucky person, some authorizing official, gets to go on annually and say, yes, we're still meeting CMMC compliance, right? It was suggested that you have a company come in and do a third-party company come in and do an assessment, right? And make sure that not a certification assessment, but a readiness assessment kind of thing, to verify that, yes, you still meet all those. Because if you do say, yes, Scouts honor, however that is, we're still 110 and we meet CMMC compliance, and there is some sort of problem, and there's a False Claims Act opened up, they're going to, if you have somebody that has come in and performed that assessment, you have some arrows in your quiver to say, hey, look, this is why I said that I'm still compliant, because we had a third party come in and verify that we are, right? And so, but that it can open you up to False Claims Act. So you just got to be very careful about that and make sure that truly nothing has changed. Truly, you're still doing everything you say we're doing, all the ongoing management monitoring and everything else, that you actually are doing that. That's what you're attesting to. So, or that's what you're affirming. So just make sure that you're doing that. Most of these things are opened up by, most of the False Claims Acts are opened up by not a breach or something, but by whistleblower. And I did find one more thing out at CS5. I think it's CS5. It might have been CMMC Day, but they said that if you go look, most of the people who filed the False Claims Act, the whistleblower themselves, were IT people. So that are maybe unhappy with the way things are going. So be careful.
All right, Brooke, for our listeners at home, And those that couldn't attend CS5 West this year, what is the biggest takeaway that they should leave with?
Well, one, it's a great event. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of CMMC movers and shakers there. Katie Arrington was there. She's always great. If you haven't heard her speak, I would make it a point of finding her somewhere and listen to her speak. Stacy Bostanek, she's great. She wasn't. I don't believe she was at CS5. I didn't hear, but I did see her at CMMC Day. She was awesome. But there's all sorts of great things. CS5 West is in San Diego. Great place to go. I enjoyed it. So it's it's a good place to go. But as far as the takeaways really are that CMMC is here. It's real. November really it's already May, right? So November is just right around the corner. So phase 2 is going to start in a few short months. And there is no time to waste. If you want to be part of the DIB, you really, really need to get in on making sure that you're level 2 certified, and understand that at the most perfect timeline, starting from scratch, you may get to the point where, you say it's 12 to 18 months to implement. You go do your mock and do your certification assessment, and then you find out that, we need to push the certification assessment because we didn't do well on our mock because we got to clean up some documentation, right? So, documentation is not the easiest thing to do. There's a lot of time spent on getting all the documentation right and all the documentation in place and linked together that how it needs to be done. So, but the biggest takeaway is that it's here. It's off to a huge running start, and it's moving forward. So don't get left behind. Don't want to sound like the sky's falling kind of person, but it really is off to the races and coming very quick, and have no clue how much to listen to those prime contractors that are saying, either do it now or you'll get crumbs, but they're out there saying that right now. Some of them are. So anyway, biggest takeaway is get busy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brooke.
No problem.
If you have questions about what we covered, reach out to us. We're here to help fast track your compliance journey. Text, email, or call in your questions and we'll answer them for free here on the podcast. You can find our contact info at CMMCComplianceGuide.com. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay compliant, stay secure, and make sure to subscribe.